Now that the 49ers roster is closer to clarity and we have a better understanding of who's going to be playing week one against the New York Jets, time to go through, look at the roster, and find out which areas have become strengths for the 49ers and which potentially could be weaknesses for this team heading into the season. Can they get better? Can they not? We're going to talk about all that and more in this episode of 49ers Cutback.
From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm excited to talk about this because full breakdown on the 49ers roster. We got some more clarity. And, of course, this has been a topic since Tuesday when the 49ers went through and cut from 91 down to 53, just looking at the roster and who made it. And then, of course, yesterday there was more roster gymnastics as the 49ers went ahead and put some guys on IR. John Feliciano, Ambry Thomas, they go to IR. They go ahead and they waive, a defensive lineman in Okawanu, and he's trying to get back to the practice squad. We don't know if there's a claim in for him as of the time that I'm recording this. We'll see. Hopefully, Sam Okawanu makes it to the 49ers practice squad. I think they would really enjoy that. But there's also just continued roster moves, bringing back guys. You had to bring back Eric Saubert and Rock Yassin, and you wanted to get Ben Barch on this roster because right now, Trent Williams is still holding out. Brandon Ayuk is still holding in. So now you have 7 wide receivers on the roster. But now that you're starting to get a clear picture of what each position looks like, at least the starter and most of the depth, we can kind of look and evaluate each spot. Did they get better from last year? Are they exactly the same? And just look at it like this. Is the starter a strength for this football team? Is the depth a strength for this football team? Is the starter a weakness? Is the depth a weakness? We can go through position by position group and really evaluate where this 49ers team stands. I think it'll give us a clear picture on areas that maybe they're going to have to make up for during the season. We do know the 49ers have one of the best rosters in the NFL, if not the best. Case in point, they had 3 players claimed off waivers, and Samuel Womack was almost claimed by 3 different teams. They all put in claims for him. So the players on the 49ers roster are definitely respected around the league. Last year, it was 4 guys. This year, it was 3 guys. 49ers roster still tremendous depth, and that's not including the fact that every one of the 49ers rookies besides Jared Kingston made this team. So they are loading up with young talent. They still have a lot of their own talent that they've drafted and developed, and throw in some key players they've gotten through trade or free agency, and they've built a real juggernaut. A team that consistently goes to the NFC Championship game and competes to get to the biggest game of all. But you can't afford to have every single position group be the absolute best. In a salary cap era, you just can't afford that. So now we've got to look at the roster and find those situations where maybe they're just not as strong. And I think identifying weaknesses is something that every single coaching staff, whether you're in San Francisco or you're on another coaching staff, does. Identify strengths, identify weakness, amplify your strengths, try to limit and hide your weaknesses the best you possibly can. That is the name of the game for the 49ers and for all teams in the NFL. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. If you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. And I'm going to go through position by position and talk about, who's on the roster. We kind of have an idea. Most people already know, but which positions are strengths and weaknesses. And newsflash, it's just not possible to have every single position group be a strength. It might be that your starters are a strength, but maybe your depth is a weakness because sometimes you have to be a little bit top heavy at some positions and skimp on the other half. And we know that, yes, you can definitely change that sometimes with key rookies that you've been able to add in. I mean, look at a guy like Jair Brown that's starting at safety in his second year. Those types of things help extend your potential playoff window, your winning window, and that's also the formula for making sure you can consistently win games. But we're going to start on offense. Let's start with Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers quarterback room. Quarterback Brock Purdy, I think, definitely is a strength for this football team. Is he a top 10 quarterback? Is he a top 5 quarterback? I'll leave that for somebody else to discuss. What I do know is that Brock Purdy has been fantastic running Kyle Shanahan's scheme since he came in and took over in 2022. Last year was one of the best years for a quarterback in San Francisco in a long time. He was starting to remind us of the great quarterbacks that we've had in the past. Now, he's got a long ways to go to get his legacy to where it should be amongst those other guys. But just looking at what he did last year, as far as accuracy, as far as making the proper reads, getting the offense into the proper plays, has been a real strength for Brock Purdy. His recognition of defensive concepts and recognizing where to go with the ball has been one of the best things I've seen in a while in San Francisco. So, highly optimistic. That makes Brock Purdy a strength for this football team. When Brock Purdy's on the field, you feel like he can make a play for your team. It's not as simple as him operating within the offense. He's also capable of extending a play, getting outside the pocket, still locating a receiver down the field and making that key throw. He's also perfectly capable of using his legs to extend drives by getting first downs. We saw that in full display last year in the NFC Championship game against Detroit. So Brock Purdy's added elements of his sneaky athleticism is a key factor in why Brock Purdy helps the football team win. Yes, operating within the pocket is huge for the San Francisco 49ers, but being able to do things on the other end as well are really, really huge. So Brock Purdy's strength. Now, one of the key factors has been a little bit of a changeover when it comes to backup quarterback. Last year, it was Sam Darnold, it was Trey Lance, it was Brandon Allen. You had some veterans, but you had some young studs when you look at their draft pick, where they were. You had 2 third overall picks in Sam Darnold and Trey Lance. Both of them are gone. And they bring in Joshua Dobbs. And this was a fun signing because you had Brandon Allen and you knew he was going to be consistent. He had been a backup for Joe Burrow. He's been in San Francisco for a couple years. You kind of know what you're getting with Brandon Allen. But with Joshua Dobbs, it's very interesting because he's a guy that can extend with his legs. And I think having these 2 guys and 2 key veterans behind Brock Purdy makes this quarterback room a strength for the 49ers. Because you can't always have a quarterback on your roster that you feel can win 8 to 10 games if something happens to your starter. That's not what you're trying to do when you get a backup. You want to get a guy that Brock Purdy's going to miss, 1, 2, 3, 4 games, then go split it. He misses 4, that quarterback can go 2-2. And I think the 49ers have that with Joshua Dobbs and Brandon Allen, more so in Joshua Dobbs than Allen, because I think Joshua Dobbs can extend plays. He can make things happen with his legs. He's a playmaker. He can get you through a couple games. Seen him do it for Arizona last year. We've seen him do it for Minnesota last year. So he's well-traveled. He understands concepts, and he's picking up this offense pretty well. I think it's a strength for the 49ers. I think it's a better backup quarterback situation than they've had in the past. And that's good news, and they still got Tanner Mordecai on the practice squad. They'll continue working with him. But I think quarterback room in totality is a strength for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, running back took a little bit of a hit with Elijah Mitchell re-injuring that hamstring on Monday, having season-ending surgery coming up, and being placed on season-ending IR. But the 49ers had insulated themselves. Now, number one, the starting running back for the San Francisco 49ers is an absolute strength. Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in football. He's one of the best playmakers, if not the best playmaker in football with the ball. I mean, he's just crazy with the ball in his hands. So the 49ers definitely have a strength when it comes to running back. And then you look at the backups, and if it would have been Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, Isaac Guerendo, Kyle Juszczyk, I would have said for sure this is absolutely the most strength-laden team as far as position group that they have. I think that with Jordan Mason still, it's a tremendous strength for the 49ers. Isaac Guerendo showed speed, but Patrick Taylor Jr. is also going to be a good cog in this 49ers running back room. He's big, he's physical, he helps on special teams, which they ultimately need. So I do believe depth is still a strength for the 49ers. I just wish that strength included Elijah Mitchell because I think it would have been stronger. So I don't think this is the strength that coming in to the season I thought it was going to be. I think it's taken a little bit of a hit with Elijah Mitchell, but that could definitely kind of alleviate if Isaac Guerendo is able to get healthy from having the groin problem. Now, he was running on a side field today. That's good news. Potentially, that would help him a lot. So if Guerendo could get in there and start working his way in and take on some of the Elijah Mitchell role, I will feel even more and more comfortable with the strength of the running back room. But I still think it's really good because I think Jordan Mason is phenomenal. And plus, you've got the best fullback in the entire NFL. So best running back, best fullback, really good backup in Jordan Mason has to be a strength for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, let's go to wide receiver. And I think this one is a little bit more complicated because of the Brandon Ayuk situation. Brandon Ayuk, of course, holding in, not showing up at practice. And without Brandon Ayuk out there, I think that the starters take a little bit of a hit. So I'm not going to call it a weakness because you still have Deebo Samuel, you still have Jawan Jennings, and you still have guys like Chris Conley, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing. So you've added some key young players to go with the vets. I don't think it's a strength, and I don't think it's a weakness right now. I think with Brandon Ayuk, this is 100% a strength. You have your starting X receiver, your starting Z with Deebo Samuel, and then you have key players that can play key roles, whether that is Ricky Pearsall or Jacob Cowing using his speed, or even using Chris Conley and his ability to find places to get open and block. So I'm not calling it a strength, even though I think they will be just fine if Brandon Ayuk doesn't play. I don't think it's going to be one of those things where receivers just can't get open. We've seen them operate without Ayuk before. Look at the New York Giants game last year. Brock Purdy had a fantastic game. George Kittle went off. Deebo Samuel had a fantastic game. And I feel like they do have more depth when you look at guys like Jacob Cowing. I feel like he's going to make some plays for this football team. If Ricky Pearsall's healthy, and he'll be healthy at some point, he's able to create separation and get open. I've seen that at training camp pretty consistently. So I like the wide receiver room. I'm not going to call it a strength or a weakness. I'm going to call it, steady right there because of the Ayuk situation. If Ayuk is the X receiver, then the 49ers, this is absolutely a strength. They've definitely got better at depth. They've upgraded over who they had in the past, and I think it becomes a strength. But it's all contingent on Brandon Ayuk and whether he comes in. And who knows? Maybe they trade the player and they end up getting somebody else. I don't know what's going to happen with that. But I think until we know about Brandon Ayuk, I can't say the starters is a strength because Deebo is fantastic. But we don't have a legit X receiver besides Brandon Ayuk that could step in right now. Jawan Jennings, he can play X, but he's not going to excel. Chris Conley, he can play X, but he's not going to excel the position. The closest we have to being able to play X and potentially excel is Ricky Pearsall. And with the injury, we just don't know what we're going to get yet. So keeping it status quo, it's not a strength, it's not a weakness. Once you add Ayuk in, it's going to be a big strength for the San Francisco 49ers. Now let's look at tight end because I think tight end is interesting. George Kittle is always a strength for this football team. So it's definitely a strength tight end wise as your starter. I think when you look at the backups are potentially better than they were last year. That's what you're ultimately trying to do is get better at the position. I don't think the 49ers got as good as they wanted to at the position. I think that they were hoping Cameron Latu and Braden Willis were going to develop into the tight ends they were looking for. that Cameron Latu was going to be a receiving threat behind George Kittle in certain sets, and that Braden Willis was going to be able to block and be a move tight end and do the things they needed him to do out of the backfield, and also playing that move tight end role. Of course, didn't materialize. Braden Willis is on the practice squad, and Cameron Latu's on the Cleveland Browns practice squad. They also brought in Logan Thomas to ensure in case Cameron Latu didn't develop enough after his 2 knee surgeries. And that unfortunately didn't work out because Logan Thomas injured his hamstring. They brought him back last week, and they went ahead and released him again. So I don't know what they're going to do there. So you have Eric Saubert, who I have kind of said reminds me of Charlie Warner and Ross Dwelley put together. He blocks pretty well. I'm not ready to say he blocks as well as Charlie Warner, but he's close. And then he catches the football like Ross Dwelley. The problem with Eric Saubert, he's not tremendously athletic. He's not a player that's going to be able to really pressure a defense by catching the football consistently. Can catch the ball underneath. He can sit in zones. He can be a possession tight end. So, I mean, those things can definitely help your football team. Conversions on third down when you're in 2 tight end sets, potentially some red zone targets. I think Eric Saubert's a nice addition to the 49ers. Plus, he's really good on special teams. John Lynch reiterated that yesterday. So I like those things about him. Same with Jake Tunges. Very similar to Eric Saubert. He's a good blocker. He's a guy that can be a possession receiver. He's got good hands. Those things are great. I think the 49ers didn't get as talented as they wanted to be when it came to strength at the position. So I can't say that this is a strength as far as depth. Strength as a starter with George Kittle. Strength as depth, no. I'm not going to call it a weakness either because I think they improved. And, last year it was a weakness at times. Charlie Warner couldn't catch the ball. Well, Eric Saubert can. You had Braden Willis who couldn't always make the blocks. Jake Tunges is a better blocker. So let's go ahead and give credit where credit is due. So have they improved the position? Yes. But I think it's been a real weakness for a few years now. And I don't think they improved it as much as they wanted. And they really need a legitimate passing threat to put alongside George Kittle when they run 12 personnel and 22 personnel, when they get 2 tight ends on the field and sometimes be able to throw. It didn't work out. Last year, they were highly unsuccessful when they tried to throw out of those sets because of the inefficiencies in the passing game of Charlie Warner. So I think they tried to do something. Maybe they're not done. John Lynch wasn't ready to say that they wouldn't eventually bring back Logan Thomas, so we'll keep an eye out for that. I think he would improve the receiving core from the tight end position, but the roster's crazy right now. You have 7 wide receivers, so we'll see what ultimately happens. So I'm not ready to say it's a weakness. It's definitely not a strength as far as depth at the tight end position. So I think it's kind of status quo. I think it's good enough, and that's kind of where I'm going to keep it. Now let's get to the offensive line, and the O-line is one of the most crazy ones that everyone's always talking about. And of course, the big obstacle, Trent Williams is not in camp or not at practice. So we don't know exactly what we're going to get as far as Trent. I mean, now we're getting to a realistic realization that he might not play in week 1. Because even if he comes in now, can he get prepared in time to play week 1? Is that smart to play him in week 1? I think those are legit questions. So we're looking at a starting offensive line of Jalen Moore, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, young rookie who stepped up, Dominic Pooney, and Colton McKivitz. And I can't say that's a strength. I think this is now become a little bit of a weakness. Coach Chris Foerster talked about that level, where you fall below that level, and what's that going to be? I think Trent Williams helped keep you above that level. You got such great play from left tackle that it amplified the play of Aaron Banks and made everything easy. Plus, you didn't have to chip. You didn't have to help. He could do it all. Trent can just take care of everything he needs to take care of over there. Best pass rusher. You don't have to give help. He can handle it. Without that, now you potentially have to chip and give help on both sides. They normally turn that attention to Colt McKivitz. He would get the best pass rusher, and they would chip him. They would double. They would give help with a running back. There were lots of things they did to help Colt McKivitz. Having Jalen Moore and Colt McKivitz, that's going to make it entirely more difficult. You're going to have to run the football consistently and run it well. And what that probably means is defenses know that's what you're going to do, and they're going to try to load the box on the 49ers. So it's not like these guys are terrible. I don't want anyone to think that. I don't want anyone to think they're bad. But I think as a unit, it's not the best unit the 49ers can put out there as far as offensive line. And I think that's a concern. As soon as you plug in Trent Williams, the offensive line changes. That makes Banks better. I talked about the perspectives. Now you can give help to Colton McKivitz, and that changes some things. I think Dominic Pooney is a real upgrade at right guard. I think he's going to stabilize that right guard position. He's been fantastic. He's an improvement right now over John Feliciano and Spencer Burford. That's great. They got better at that position. You had Trent Williams. We could say Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, and Dominic Pooney, solid offensive linemen. And then you look at Jake Brendel and Colt McKivitz and you figure out how to get by, and that keeps you kind of above that level that Chris Foerster's talking about. Without Trent Williams, Jalen Moore is a average tackle, and I think that brings everything down. So right now, I think the offensive line is a weakness. They need Trent Williams to get this thing reestablished. I think with a healthy Aaron Banks, which he's supposed to be back at practice next week, a new rookie in Dominic Pooney, this could definitely help this football team. But I'm concerned there. And then you look at the depth. John Feliciano's on IR. So that's a concern. So you're losing one of your best backups, at least for part of the season. But Spencer Burford is going to be back. He's been practicing. That's a nice backup. He started 14 games last year for the 49ers. Solid backup behind Dominic Pooney. Nick Zakel has come on the scene, and he's going to be filling that John Feliciano role. Right now, Nick Zakel's not as good as John Feliciano. So you got to feel like your depth not quite as good. It doesn't mean at some point he's not going to reach that level, because I think he can. His run blocking has been really good through training camp in the preseason. Pass blocking has been hit and miss. He does a lot better pass blocking at center than he does guard. They've got Ben Barch. He's going to help as well. But I'm worried about depth. And right now they have two offensive tackles besides Trent. I think they're fully expecting to get Trent in. But if they have to do something, they don't have an offensive tackle on the practice squad. That probably means someone like Ben Barch or Spencer Burford are filling in at tackle. I don't know how much I love that. So I would say right now, offensive line has got to be the biggest weakness on offense. And that's saying something in a position they really needed to improve. But Trent Williams holding out in this contract situation has put it in that spot, plus John Feliciano's injury. So I mean, when you looked at the positions, the only position that looked like a weakness is the offensive line right now. Hopefully the 49ers can figure this thing out and not really have any problems, but they're just right now struggling at the position. So let's flip it over to defense and talk about the defensive line first. Nick Bosa, Leonard Floyd, who's practicing again, he's going to play on the Monday night matchup. That's great news. Then you got Malik Collins and Javon Hargrave. Starting defensive line, a tremendous strength for the San Francisco 49ers. The addition of Leonard Floyd and Malik Collins, that was huge. You needed to have guys who come in for Chase Young, someone to come in for Eric Armstead, and they replaced them with seasoned veterans who understand how to play within this scheme. It's a really good matchup. These guys are going to be good for the 49ers. Starters, really, really good. Now you look at the backups, and we don't know what's going to happen with Yetur Gross-Matos. He's dealing with a knee injury, the same one as Leonard Floyd. He's just a little bit worse. He's week to week. We'll see what happens next week, but overall, depth-wise, I think that was a nice signing. Robert Beal Jr., I don't know if he's lived up to the billing that we thought he was going to be when he came out last year in the 5th round as a GTFO guy that could get off the line of scrimmage. But I did see vast improvements from week 1 preseason to week 3, so I'm optimistic about Robert Beal. I like Yetur Gross-Matos, but I have some concerns about Beal right now. I can't say that he's a strength. I do think Gross-Matos is a strength for the 49ers, so that kind of evens out. When you're looking at the backups in the interior defensive line, Jordan Elliott and Kevin Givens, I believe is a strength, because I think Jordan Elliott is going to be fantastic for this 49ers defense. Started last year for Cleveland, started a lot of games in his career, and now he's going to be coming in fresh in that Bravo unit. So I think the depth is pretty good too. All the depth that are there, besides Robert Beal Jr., I feel like is a strength for this 49ers defense. If they had Kalia Davis, that would even put it over the top. Of course, he's starting the year on IR. He will come back at some point. And then that interior defensive line will be a real strength for the 49ers. So it's a strength right now, but when Kalia Davis comes back, it's a real strength. It's 5 deep. So I think right now, defensive line overall is a strength. And people might have question marks about Yetur Gross-Matos. I don't. I saw him play at training camp. I know what he's going to do. Fill in that Arden Key role. He's going to be fantastic as far as pass rush, especially rushing over guards. That's going to be huge. So I know Robert Beal Jr. is a question mark, but I think the other guys carry for the San Francisco 49ers and put it at a strength. You want to say overall that it's not a strength or a weakness at D end when it comes to depth? I'm okay with that. You have one good one in Yetur Gross-Matos, one question mark with Robert Beal Jr., so I would be okay with that kind of designation. But overall, I think the defensive line is a huge advantage and strength for the 49ers, and why wouldn't it be? They just continue to make sure they bring guys in, and they do have some guys in the practice squad they could elevate. They have Alex Barrett, Jonathan Garvin. They're trying to get Sam Okawanu to the practice squad as well. So they could elevate those guys, and I think in that case, it definitely does help a little bit. But I think Beal Jr. is going to end up making some plays this year. I have some faith in Robert Beal Jr. So overall, defensive line is strength. Linebacker, it's hard to think that this linebacker room can be a strength without Drake Greenlaw. But they did a good job of making sure they brought in Devondre Campbell. So you've got Fred Warner, absolute monster, best middle linebacker in the league. It ain't close. Devondre Campbell's been an all-pro. He was an all-pro in 2021. I think he's looked really good on film. I broke down the first half of the 49ers' last preseason game over on Patreon, and I was very impressed with Devondre Campbell. And so I think Devondre Campbell and Fred Warner are two of the best that we know. You're going to play 70 to 75% of your snaps in the nickel package, which means those are going to be the two linebackers on the field. I think that's a tremendous strength for the 49ers. Then you've got D. Winters, and right now he's missing practice with an ankle, but he flashes. And I think him and Curtis Robinson, who had a really good training camp and preseason, if they're starting at Sam Backer, I feel really good about this group. But there's a question mark. We haven't seen them start. So I think I'm still calling it a strength because those other two guys are really good. When Dre gets back, it's going to be a crazy strength. Now, when we're looking at depth, I think that's where I have a little bit of concerns. And I know I just talked about Curtis Robinson or D. Winters. One of them will be a backup. That's great. But DFF, Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, run defense has been not great. It's tough to watch on film. Sometimes he's kind of stuck in the mud, and he struggles to get downhill, pull that trigger. He just reads a little bit slower than everyone else. Have concerns about that. Tatum Bethune, the rookie, he makes the football team. I'm so glad he made this football team. He pulls the trigger. He's great when it comes to run defense, but he struggles when it comes to coverage. That's two of your backup three linebackers. So I have a little bit of concerns when it comes to depth about what they could do in this linebacker room. Once Dre comes back, then all of a sudden, Curtis Robinson and D. Winters are depth, and all of a sudden your depth gets a lot better. I would say right now your starters are a strength for the 49ers linebackers, and I think your depth right now, I'm going to call it a weakness for the mere fact that I look at the end. Now, if DFF and Tatum Bethune are not playing in football games and it's Curtis Robinson and D. Winters, that's a great news for the 49ers, and it becomes more of a strength. But I think when you look at the position in totality, those two guys I have concerns with because Bethune's lack of coverage ability, right now he's just not very good at it. He'll get better. I really do believe that at DFF just against the run. So it's on D. Winters. It's on Curtis Robinson. The injuries to D. Winters, I'm a little concerned. At some point, though, it's going to be a tremendous strength for the 49ers once Dre Greenlaw gets back. Now, let's talk about cornerback, which could be maybe the biggest strength of the San Francisco 49ers football team, and who would have thought that? Maybe the biggest strength on defense for sure. You've got all-pro Charvarius Ward. He's going to be fantastic. Deommodore Lenoir is on target to have a Pro Bowl season. Last year, he had 2 or 3 footballs he should have had interceptions on, and if he would have had interceptions, he would have been a Pro Bowler. He is more comfortable. He's more tenacious than he's ever been before. He's going to play that nickel corner role again when they're a nickel package with 75% of the time they will be. And so he's going to get a lot of time to step up. The way that he played in that final preseason game, the way he was helping out in the run game, filling his gaps, making tackles, good in coverage. Deommodore Lenoir was the defensive player of training camp. He was absolutely fantastic. Those two guys are great. Then you throw in the fact they brought in Isaac Yedem, and it's likely Isaac Yedem's going to start on the outside when they go to nickel package. So a guy who played and started 8 or 9 games last year for the Saints, had a ton of pass defenses. He looked really good early on in training camp before he rolled his ankle. I think they feel really comfortable with that. Now you've got the second-round pick, Renardo Green, who has looked really good and versatile, playing nickel, playing outside. I think they're very excited about him halfway through the season. This dude's going to have everything figured out, and he's going to be a big-time player, tremendous depth at the position. Then they bring back Rock Yassin. Rock Yassin was the most consistent defensive back through the preseason games. You look at him, he played so many snaps, and he was just consistently good. He's one of those guys they didn't really throw at him a whole lot, so you didn't get to see him targeted because his coverage was so good. Good coverage, physical in the run game, physical at the point of attack. Liked Rock Yassin a lot. So glad they brought him back. You're talking about depth and veteran depth at the position. You go Isaac Yedem, you go Rock Yassin, you go Renardo Green. And I don't know exactly the depth. I would guess it would go Yedem, then Green, then Yassin. But Yassin has been so good. If he was ahead of Renardo Green right now, I don't think that would shock anyone. That's how good he played during the preseason. And then, of course, they've got Darrell Luter Jr. So, Luter Jr., a young guy with upside, length. I like him. Strength on strength on strength. Starters, absolute strength. Depth, absolute strength. 49ers have turned the cornerback room into a strength of this football team. And I love to see it. You know, you got defensive line strength now, cornerback room strength. Starters for your linebacker strength. It's good. Depth for linebackers, a little bit of a question. Don't have that question mark when it comes to the cornerbacks, though, which has been a problem. They've usually been 2 or 3 deep. Now they're 5, 6 deep. We'll see what Luter Jr. does. I think they're 5 deep right now. Luter Jr., if he steps up, could be even better. Safety, Talanoa Hufanga, but Hufanga's practicing. We don't know about week 1. Jair Brown has looked so good. Malik Mustafa, he flashes. George Odom has been absolutely consistent. And then I'll throw Tracy Walker in there because Adam Schefter reported when he signed to the practice squad that Tracy Walker is expected to be elevated week 1 because they don't think Talanoa Hufanga is going to play. So we'll see how that one works out. Tracy Walker, been in the league for 6 years with the Detroit Lions, started a lot of football games, really good special teamer. He would be depth for the 49ers. So I'm going to do this because Hufanga is going to be playing within the first few weeks, or they would have kept him on the PUP list. I'm going to figure him into this, and I think Hufanga and Jair Brown together is a tremendous starting safety group. I think that's an absolute strength for this football team when it comes to the starters. Hufanga and Jair Brown being able to be left and right safeties. Nick Sorensen talked about that again today, having guys who aren't stuck into free safety, strong safety, but the ability to do both, and these guys can both do it. Also, Hufanga's been out, so Jair Brown has been tasked with understanding this defense and being able to get guys lined up as a vocal leader in the back end of the defense. Now, when you get these guys together, it's going to be tremendous. Talanoa Hufanga is one of the best film study and best pre-snap guys that I've seen in the league in a long time. He's really good at it. And if he can do that with Jair's ability to make plays, we have playmakers now at safety. I really like these guys. I think that's a strength. George Odom has looked so good during training camp in the preseason. So good. So good, in fact, that I'm comfortable if he has to sign play with the Jets. You go back and you watch or listen to my videos from before when training camp was going to start, even after Nick Sorensen said he had looked good in OTAs, and I was concerned about George Odom playing against Aaron Rodgers and those New York Jets weapons in week 1. I'm no longer concerned. I've seen him do it. He can not only win in the box like he used to when he was in Indianapolis, but now he's good in coverage as well. I think he can handle the role until Talanoa Hufanga is 100% ready to go. So I like Odom, and I love Mustafa. Mustafa is flying around. I think he could get better at making tackles. I talked about that on my breakdown as well. He's got to make sure he comes up to make those tackles under control. So you can fly up, but at some point you have to get yourself under control and have the right target and the right aiming point when you're going to make these tackles. I think that's something he's got to work on, but he is flying around and you like that aggressiveness, and there's no fear in pulling the trigger. When he sees something, he goes. He trusts his instincts. He trusts his eyes. That's a huge thing for a young player. So I think when you look at depth, and I'll throw Tracy Walker in there because I think that's a possibility he steps in. I think this is a strength for the 49ers. And think about that. Secondary-wise, strength at cornerback, starters, and depth. Strength at safety, starters, and depth. 49ers have done a tremendous job building this football team. And if they had Dre Greenlaw ready to go, this whole entire defense would be strength across the board. So we know offensive line is the real glaring weakness for the San Francisco 49ers when you look at the roster. And then, of course, with special teams, Jake Moody, Mitch Wishnowsky, Tabor Pepper. Wishnowski's been really good. for a couple years now. Tabor Pepper's been solid as a long snapper, and Moody has the leg. So I don't know if I call Moody a strength right now, but I don't call him a weakness either, and I think that's good news. So right now I'm keeping him like that, just like I did with the wide receivers. We'll see if he can be more consistent. He can become a strength for this football team, because all of a sudden you used to have to get one extra first down with Robbie Gould. Now you don't have to get that to still get points on the board. That could be huge, but you got to make sure you're consistent on your field goals and your extra points, and we'll see if Moody can do that. So I'm not ready to call him a strength. I am willing to call Mitch Wisnowski a strength and Tabor Pepper a strength. And so just remember that when it comes to the specialists. But overall, 49ers roster has more strengths than it has weaknesses. And, that's how you're trying to build a roster. It's tough when you're trying to skimp in certain areas. And if you don't have young players that work out, well, then that can change the dynamics as well. For the most part, they've had young players step in, or they've been able to make a move to bring in a key guy, a guy like Tarvarius Ward that they brought in free agency who's been huge, or trading for Christian McCaffrey or Trent Williams. Those have been key moves for the 49ers. So the roster overall is in a good spot. They are definitely one of the best rosters with one of the best starting units across the board, but still have key depth at key positions. That's why I wanted to go through this and talk about the 49ers strengths and weaknesses. I think we're going to see that there's a lot more strengths and weaknesses, but there are still some places they have to figure things out. And some of the big question marks are because of Brandon Ayuk and because of Trent Williams. So those things still have to be figured out, and hopefully they will soon. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. And remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.